You want to know something I just learned recently? There's a difference between talking a lot and being a good communicator. Apparently, I can talk a lot, but I'm a bad communicator. Which I was definitely not aware of until, 2 weeks ago? Yeah, we all know about my stupidly perfect boyfriend and his ability to be stupidly perfect in every aspect ever. Well, I guess I've found something we're both equally terrible at. It's expressing the way we feel. I don't like being ignored. I'm not clingy or anything, but if you just straight up choose not to make an effort with me and we're friends or something, I'm going to be salty. I expect as a friend that someone is going to make just as much effort to talk to me as I would to them. This, of course, also counts for my boyfriend. Now, he wasn't exactly ignoring me. We spend a lot of time together, but I noticed that he just seemed like he was super distant all of the time. And he would do a lot of stuff like cancel plans we had, or seem to be super far off in his head when I talked to him. It got frustrating super quickly. This went on for 3 weeks before it started to get to me. I started doing a lot of things that got on his nerves too. I wasn't a high school sophomore or junior that thought pranking her boyfriend would get him to notice her, but I also wasn't sure how to get his attention. I called for the check an hour into the date that we had because he was sitting on his phone for literally half of it, doing something that he was so focused on he wouldn't even answer the questions I had about it. Don't get me wrong, he has the right to his own privacy, but at least tell me you can't say or would prefer not to say anything about it. Don't just ignore the question. I went home right afterward. We had a short phone call that consisted of him apologizing, and then we left it at that. I noticed he was zoning out when I was talking to him. I would just walk out mid-conversation to go clean something or do some homework to wait for him to notice. I sometimes got snappy with him if the things he was saying were dismissive, but most of all, I would get super sad when he wasn't around. Here's the thing, I'm totally a strong, independent woman, but I really do like Hugo. And we haven't exactly been dating a long time, and I don't like the idea of us not working out so quickly. It's not exactly a self-esteem booster to say that your high school relationship didn't last. Well, this went on for about 2 weeks or so. We were both walking on eggshells around each other, and it really wasn't pretty. Again, I have relatively little relationship experience, and I've never been one to just talk out my feelings. I've always been just kind of embarrassed by the things that I think about in my head. So if I was just to express the fact that these feelings make me upset, I get a little freaked out that I might be made fun of. I know that sounds a bit ridiculous to some people, but it's something I've had to deal with for a long time. Plus, I don't think you guys have met my mom. There's a little bit of childhood trauma in there. Okay, that's an exaggeration. My mom didn't traumatize me. She was just more of a believer in the idea that I should be a doer versus a talker. If I came to her with something that was bothering me, she was more inclined to make a game plan for me on how to fix it myself versus just being a support system that listened. I know that's not nearly as bad as some people might have it, but it didn't exactly help me communicate my feelings. I was a teenage girl that didn't want to make lists and figure out my deepest secrets. I wanted someone to listen to me and support me, and just let me know I wasn't totally crazy. She did that too, but not nearly as much. I guess she was helpful when she did help me figure out some issues. But of course, I'm still stubborn, and I just wanted to be listened to when it came to my issues with Hugo. The issue was simply that I didn't want to be a big girl and tell him that I wanted him to listen to me. So yeah, I was sulking a lot, and I was noticing it starting to really bug Hugo. I mean, I know this sounds terrible, but I was getting a little excited at the time. He was finally going to say something, and I could tell him everything, and it would all end in a happily ever after. Well, it did end in a happily ever after, but not exactly gracefully. He came over to my apartment to hang out, and at this point, I was distancing myself a little bit as a way to get him to talk to me. And finally, he cracked. In the worst way possible. We've been dating for what, 3 months? We got into our first fight. I've only had like one boyfriend other than Hugo, and we didn't fight until we ended up breaking up. I got so freaked out that we were actually going to break up because of this, I started crying. Yeah, I don't usually cry, but I wasn't exactly sure what else to do. It didn't help the situation at all. We both became these really emotional messes that were mad at each other. He was mad at me that I was mad at him and wouldn't tell him why, and I kept blubbering on through my ugly crying face about how he literally just wasn't there when we were together. Fighting with your significant other? 10 out of 10 don't recommend. We were just kind of talking in circles until I think I paused, and literally 2 seconds later, he did too. We were just silently looking at each other, and it was like the simultaneous light bulb just popped over our heads as we realized we never actually told each other why we were acting the way we were. He told me about how he was just freaking out about getting a new and smaller apartment since his was getting too expensive to keep. I was so shocked that he didn't tell me, but he said he knew I would worry if I found out. Which, well, he's not wrong. I would have worried, and I would have talked about it, which probably wouldn't help. I finally took the time to be real with him. I've had a lot of insecurity issues since the two of us started dating. Him being literally the most perfect man ever, for one, and me just being me. I just always have this fear in the back of my head that he's just going to up and leave one day. But it would be totally for a good reason. Not to mention, I've never really known how to properly do the whole relationship thing, you know? My first and last relationship before him was back in high school, and that didn't exactly go well. I've never been that good expressing how I feel, and that wasn't just going to up and change because I had a boyfriend now. Not to mention, he wasn't really telling me how he was feeling either. Lastly, I made sure to completely come clean about what it was like growing up with my parents, and why they were such a big part of the way I express myself. He sat there the whole time I let this out. And while I felt totally embarrassed telling him all of my deepest, darkest secrets, he just sat and listened. And he reassured me that it was okay for me to be this way, because no one else was going to tell me not to be. It was nice to be heard for once. And while it was so seriously weird expressing how I felt toward him, in a way, it was kind of nice, and very necessary. Hugo and I have been working a lot more on the ways we communicate. He knows that I struggle a lot with talking about how I feel, so he makes it very known to me that I have to talk these things out with him to make us work. So, moral of the story, kids. Yes, you can talk a lot, but if you're not talking about the right things, it's not exactly doing you any favors. I'm glad I got into that fight. Honestly, it gave me some peace of mind. So please, do the right talking with people. It'll help in the long run.